Hey everyone, welcome. Today I'm going to show you exactly how to sell yourself to your buyer clients and how to perform a powerful buyer consultation that builds trust, positions you as the expert, and sets the tone for a smooth transaction. Most agents struggle here because it's not just about showing houses, it's about showing why you're the right agent to guide them. If you don't nail this, you risk losing buyers to another agent who does. So in this training, I'm going to walk through the step-by-step process I use and give you the exact framework you can apply immediately with your next client. And here's the deal. If you watch this and think, Scott, I want more hands-on help, I want someone to personally walk me through how to take my business to the next level, I'd love to connect with you. You can book a free Zoom call with me directly through my calendar link in the description below. That call is not just about training, it's about seeing if partnering with me and my team is the right move to help you hit your goals faster. So grab a pen, take notes, and let's dive in. All right, so like I mentioned, I'm going to be taking you through what I do for my buyer consultation and how I get the buyer broker signed every single time. And so obviously the NAR rules have changed a lot in the last, since August 1st of last year. But for us, nothing's really changed. I've always gotten buyer broker signed, even before the new NAR rules came into effect. I've had over 500 buyer brokers signed in my entire career. So I used to always get the buyer broker signed every single time before I'd go out there and show a client home or anything like that as well too. So I'm going to take you through everything that I've done and the reason why I've done it the way I've done it. So first thing that's important to note is the purpose of doing the buyer consultation. So for one, when doing a buyer consultation, it gives you a reason to be the first agent to meet them in person. Typically, we know that over 82% of buyers are using the first real estate agent they meet, and ultimately, you want to be that first person that they do meet. And so a buyer consultation is a great way to do that, to get in front of them, especially if you don't have like maybe a Zillow lead or something like that. If it's open house, Facebook leads, I typically use the opportunity to do a buyer consult to get in front of my leads. So also it builds trust and rapport. Obviously trust is very important in this industry. Obviously when you're giving your client advice, you want to have them be able to trust you. And when you're doing a buyer consultation, it starts building that trust and rapport. So it makes it a lot easier to work together in the future and to get their buy-in when you give them advice. So educate the buyer on the home buying process so they are prepared. I can't tell you how many times I've met a buyer in person and I educated them on the process, and maybe it was their second or third home that they've purchased at that point. But as I was going through the entire process, they were shocked at some of the things that they didn't know that goes on during that process. So you obviously want to make sure that you're educating the buyer on the home buying process, because in that way the whole process will be a lot smoother for you and your client as you're going along. Show your value to lead. Obviously a lot of it, especially here in Maricopa County, 60,000 real estate agents. And so one thing that we want to do as real estate agents is, show them what our value is, what we bring to the table. And so, I always tell people that, our job in real estate is not necessarily to sell houses. Our job is to sell ourselves. Part of that is showing the value and showing your value to the lead. Get the commitment to use you as a real estate agent. So obviously that kind of goes in that buyer broker, right? You want to get their commitment to use you as your real estate agent. Save yourself time, money, and frustration. A lot of times, when we start working with a buyer, they typically want to either see a bunch of homes without getting pre-qualified, or they want to view 40, 50, 60 homes, and you spend all your time showing them properties only for them not to buy anything, right? And so it's important, that you lead the process, because if you lead the process, it'll be a lot smoother and it'll allow yourself to be more efficient with your time, which ultimately will save yourself money as well too, because then you're not going around and spending a bunch of money on gas or spending a bunch of money on other things that aren't necessary, And so very important, you want to save yourself time, money, and frustration. Also, it'll make the home buying process smoother for everyone. Again, if you educate your client and you know what to expect, then you're going to have a lot less pushback going forward. I can't tell you how many times I've done an inspection with a lead, and then next thing you know, they're asking for everything on the report to get fixed. Ultimately that's not the way that the process works. And if we do a better job educating our clients at the beginning of the process, then it will make the entire home buying process smoother for everyone. And you're basically not, and then when you're talking about inspections or appraisals or stuff like that, they kind of already know what to expect. So plant the referral nugget to get more clients. So obviously, if you're doing it right, by about year 3 in the business, about 50% of your business should be repeat referral business. And so a lot of times I'll plant the referral nugget during the buyer consultation, because usually by the time I'm done with it, they're so hyped up to start working with me. And so usually I'll get a bunch of referrals before I even help them purchase home, and most of that's based off of the buyer consultation that we perform. And then also create a better experience for the buyer, right? Our job is to provide value, but we also want to create a great experience, because when you create a great experience for a buyer, what's going to happen? They're going to give you more referrals, and they're going to typically try to do more business with you. And so the better you do as far as educating them, the better that experience is going to be. And so these are all the purposes of the buyer consultation. The results of the buyer consultation, right? The results are important. So one, client will be more excited about purchasing a home. I can't tell you how many buyers I've met in person and done a buyer consultation with, and they were basically on the fence and they were unsure about it because they're very intimidated, especially if they're a first-time home buyer. They have no idea what to expect. And so typically, after you do the buyer consultation, if you do it correctly, most of the time your clients are going to be more excited about purchasing a home because they're going to realize that they have you in their corner to kind of help them throughout the entire process. Your lender will have an easier time getting a hold of your clients and pulling an application. This was kind of a game changer for me. When I first got into real estate, I used to meet a lot of buyers, and I'd refer to my lenders that I didn't do a buyer consultation with, and a lot of times my lenders were having problems getting a hold of those clients. And then of course my lenders started getting frustrated with me because I wasn't doing a very good job transferring high quality warm leads to them. And so once I started doing a buyer consultation, then what I was doing is I was basically selling my value, and what was happening is my lenders were having a lot easier time getting a hold of my clients because at that point they'd already committed to me. And so when my lender reached out to him, it was a little bit easier for him to not only get a hold of them, but then also pull an application as well. It'll be less likely that your client will talk to another lender without communicating to you, and less likely that lender will talk them into working with another agent. This is a very competitive market. I can't tell you how many times in the industry, that I've seen someone that will go try to get pre-qualified with another lender, and then that lender will say, hey, don't use this agent, use my agent. My agent knows my loan programs better, all that stuff. Most of it's bull, right? Like they typically, all agents work with almost all loan programs, but typically the lenders are afraid of losing clients as well. And so typically they want to refer them to agents that are committed to them. And so it's important that if you do the process correctly, you're less likely that your client will go ahead and talk to another lender. And because you've already got that commitment, even if they want to talk to another lender, they will know that they're committed to you. And so then that way they typically that lender won't be able to talk them into using someone else. This also will give you an opportunity to educate them on the lending process, because most of the times, again, lenders are going to say, hey, use my agent. They know the loan program better. Well, this is our opportunity to educate them, to let them know that's not the case, right? I work with any lender. And so that's very important to have that conversation during the process as well. And then, of course, you have built a relationship with the client, so they will be open to communicating with you and letting you know what is going on. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to agents in this industry that say, I keep calling a client and they ghost me all the time. They never respond to me, and a lot of that's because you didn't do a good job educating them. And so obviously ghosting happens, but typically if you do a great job with your buyer consult, then ghosting is going to be less, it's going to be less likely, and it will happen less frequently. So again, very important on doing that as well too. Now, what I bring. So I typically have always had better success doing buyer consultations in person. Usually I try to meet them at a Starbucks, or I've done some at houses as well too, but Starbucks typically work the best for me. Local coffee shop near their home, I'll come out to them, no big deal. I know a lot of agents do an amazing job doing these via Zoom as well too, so you can also do them virtually. I typically change all the stuff into kind of like a virtual slideshow, kind of like I'm showing you right now. But I just always have had better success in person. I do better in person, and so that's one of the ways I've always done it. But this is what I bring. So the first thing I bring is a buyer guide. I can get customized buyer guides for my title company for free. I'll kind of show you a little bit here in the picture, right? This is what a buyer guide looks like. Now, I typically don't go through the buyer guide unless some of these documents that I'm sharing here are actually already in there. But usually the buyer guide to me is more of just something I'm going to give the buyer to bring with them. You can see here it's also got my contact information on there, and because it's a book, they're less likely likely to throw away. Typically if you give someone a business card, almost all the times those fall on the ground, they lose them, stuff like that. Well, now they have this big book that you're going to be giving them that they can look at, which most of them probably don't, but at least it's got my contact information on there. And so hopefully they just put it on their dinner table, something like that, and they're less likely to throw it away. And then they always have your contact information. I also bring a dream home form. Of course, you can print off. It's not below. This is a slideshow from my team, in one of our trainings. But you can also do a dream home form, and I'll show you what a dream home form looks like. You got the agency disclosure and election form. So this is in Arizona. I always print off a real estate agency disclosure and election form. I also print off the purchase contract. Again, in our MLS, you can get in transaction desk. Some buyer guides also have purchase contracts. I have a commitment form that typically I give to all of our agents, and then also we bring the buyer broker agreement. And this is of course based out of Arizona. But we have, if you're interstate, you have your own personal buyer broker agreement, something like that, or purchase contracts. That's perfectly fine as well too. You can obviously bring those. So step one is finding out their goals. So I'm going to go ahead and unshare this here. I'm just going to kind of show you, like I talked about with a dream home form, right? So this is what my dream home form looks like. I have a logo on here. And basically what this does is this kind of just takes them through everything that they're looking for in a home. And I just kind of read this off. I ask them, okay, what location are you looking in? Maybe if there's some cross streets you don't want to cross, stuff like that. Price range. Now, when it comes to price range, I typically don't ask them what price home they want to be in because most of the time they have no idea. I typically ask them what comfortable monthly mortgage payment do they want to be around. That'll kind of give me an idea. And then based off their monthly mortgage payment, I can kind of predict, based off my knowledge, what that looks like from a price standpoint. And those people have no idea about price. They typically only know about what type of monthly payment they want to pay. Unless, of course, it's a cash buy or something like that. Then I ask them how many number of bedrooms, bathrooms, square foot range. I might even, kind of elaborate saying, okay, you're looking for small home, medium home, big home. I'll ask them some of those type of questions. Garage size, pool, RV gate or parking, RV gate or parking, single level, tour story, lot size. Describe your dream. So in this section, including special kitchen features, bonus rooms, lofts, flooring, corner lots, etc. So this is where I'm kind of going deeper into what else are you looking for in a home. And then these next questions are more hypothetical, just kind of give them an idea, right? And so typically I say, hey, listen, it's obviously up to you when you want to purchase a home, but this just kind of gives me some more hypothetical questions so that way I have a better idea of when you're potentially looking at putting a home. So the first question is, if today we found your dream home, are you in a position where you'd be willing to write an offer today? Again, if we find a dream home, are you in the position? Now, some people are going to say, no, I'm going to lease until, for another year. Some people are going to say, oh, yeah, if we found my dream home today, I'm willing to proceed forward with it by asking a question. So the second question I ask them is, in a perfect world, if we could time this out perfectly, when would you like to be sticking the key into the front door lock of your new home ready to start moving in your furniture and belongings? Again, that's very important for me to know because most people have no idea about how long it takes to close or anything like that. They just want to know, when do you want to be moving in and turning the key to your front door? And so that's why it's important that we kind of word it that way. And I'm just kind of reading it off this exact way because this is in terms that they kind of understand. So, and then of course, have you purchased a home before? And what was that experience like? If they had purchased a home, I'd like to know what that experience was like. Did they like their agent? Did they not like their agent? If there was something that their agent did that maybe they didn't like, that just kind of gives me a better understanding so that way I can better serve and support them. And I know what their past experience was like, so I also know if there's anything I need to worry about in the future as far as like any objections or anything that they look at closely, so that way I try not to repeat something that maybe their other agent did that kind of upset their these clients. So that's the first thing is I always go through the dream home form. Okay. So next step on here is I educate the buyer on the home buying process. Right? And so this kind of gets into the agency disclosure and the purchase contract. So I always bring up and again, this is in Arizona, so you might have a different document, and everything like that. But of course, I bring up the agency disclosure and election form. Now, some of these forms, at least in Arizona, are in our buyer guides that our title company provides us. If it's not, then I usually print these off. And usually I'm explaining to them, especially in Arizona, that this document, whenever we start looking at properties, we're going to sign this document. And this document basically states that I have a fiduciary duty to look out for their best interest. My job is to never sell them home. My goal is to always make sure I'm looking out for their best interest and make sure they're protected. by the purchase contract and all that good stuff as well too. So, it's very important to have, if hopefully, if you're in a different state, looking at this right now, hopefully you guys have, I'm sure you guys have a document that, explains the fiduciary duties. And so one of the things I'm trying to let my client know at this point is that I'm never going to force them to purchase a home or anything like that, and I'm going to look out for their best interest, because typically they think as agents, we typically have a lot of times the public has a low perception of us, and so this allows me to kind of combat that perception and explain that listen, I'm never going to force you to purchase a home. My goal is just to look out for your best interest and to make sure you're protected every step of the way. And so that's kind of what that's what this document states, and I'm going to kind of explain exactly what that is, and then I'm going through the purchase contract. Now, when I'm going through the purchase contract, I'm basically going to kind of hit the main things that we want to hit on. I'm going to talk about the purchase price and how we come to that purchase price. How do we negotiate it? I'm going to tell my client that the first thing I'm going to do, if you decide you want to submit an offer, I'm going to call up the agent and find out if they have any offers, because we know that they have multiple offers. We need to be a little more aggressive. If they don't have any offers, we can be a little more conservative on purchase price. Then I'm going to say, then after that, after I call the agent up, I'm going to go home. I'm going to run comps in the neighborhood, and I'm going to look at, from my perspective, do I think it's priced right? Do I think it's underpriced, or do I think it's overpriced? And then after I find out all that information, I'm going to give you a call up and let you know exactly what I think, and I'll probably give you a recommended purchase price. But at the end of the day, I work for you, so whatever offer you want to submit is completely fine with me. I just want to do my job, at least if I didn't give you my advice based on what I know about the market, the condition of the property, and all that good stuff. So I'll kind of take them through that as far as purchase price. I like to talk about earnest money here. As far as how much you for earnest money. I talk about financing. I talk about the loan contingency, especially in Arizona where there's a loan contingency. So I explain that, because one of the things, especially if they need a loan, I do typically want to let them know, once you get in our contract, doesn't mean you're qualified for the home at that point. I mean, you've been pre-qualified, but you still have to go through all the steps in order to officially get qualified for the house. And so I always tell them, don't go out and buy any new cars, don't make any new, open any new credit cards, stuff like that. As long as you don't do any of that stuff, you'll probably be okay. But of course, in Arizona, if you do, back out, be a loan contingency, because something happens with a loan, this at least guarantees you'll get your money back. So I talk about seller concessions in Arizona. Obviously, there's seller concessions where you can get to pay some of the buyer's closing costs. I do also bring up and then I talk about the inspection and the appraisal. So I talk about the inspection period. I explain some details about it, what to look for during the inspection. Obviously, there's a lot of things that are going to pop up. Really want to focus on the major items, not really worry about the small things. But I'll kind of give them some recommendations, during that process. So I'm already kind of pre-framing. So once you go through the inspection, they already kind of know what to expect, and they're not going to ask for every single thing on the inspection report to get fixed, unless they're all major things, But so I'll talk about the inspection period, and then the final thing on here I also talk about is the appraisal as well too. So I'll explain the appraisal, how that process works, at least in the state of Arizona, and so those are the main things that I typically hit on when I'm doing my buyer consultation and I'm educating them on the home buying process. So I'm doing a couple things here. One, I'm telling them all the roadblocks that could potentially come up. So I'm kind of scaring them a little bit and understanding that they need us as real estate agents, and so it's important that we educate our buyers on the process, because a lot of times people don't realize how many steps there are and how many hurdles there are to close a transaction. So I'm making sure they understand, but I'm also making sure they understand some of the moments where they could back out and get their earnest money back, especially during, explaining what the contingencies are, explain the time frames of those contingencies, so that way they have all the information necessary and they're not as surprised, going through the process. So I usually will do that, showing your value. So I have a commitment form that I kind of show all my clients here. And my commitment form is right here. And this basically shows me everything I'm going to do. I usually use this as my script, and I just kind of read off this entire document. So obviously you want to have some sort of commitment form to them as well too, and explain everything that you're going to do for your buyer, and so, some of them is pretty easy: custom-made automated home search, cross-check the MLS system daily, stuff like that. And then I says, I will guide you every step of the way to ensure you're on forward educated in the home buying process. I do not get paid until I do my job, and it says close on your home. Now, you can reward that depending on how you want it, but this is typically what my commitment looks like. And then that kind of leads into that buyer-broker agreement. And that's when I bust out the buyer-broker agreement and explain to them what that looks like. Now obviously things have changed with the new NAR requirements. So I'll probably say, hey, I'll do my best to negotiate my commission to get paid during the transaction, and in most cases, we can probably get the seller to pay for this compensation. But in the event that they're not willing to pay for the full amount, you may have to come out of pocket with the difference. I kind of explain to them what that looks like. But most of the time, because I've done such a great job explaining my value, the client's so excited to start working with me that they're ready to sign the buyer broker agreement and ready to get rocking and rolling. And so I very rarely ever have any pushback. The only time I've ever had pushback on signing a buyer broker is if someone was already working with a real estate agent. But that's one of the reasons I always try to do these buyer consultations before I ever meet someone in person or start when I meet them for the first time. That's one of the reasons I always do these buyer consultations, because I want to know, like, if they are working with an agent, I want to know that up front versus me showing them 10, 15, 20 homes and then finding out that they're already committed to some other real estate agent, And so now obviously it's a little bit different now with the buyer broker requirements and, the new NAR requirements. But at the end of the day, before that, before the new NAR requirements, a lot of agents were showing properties without buyer brokers signed, and so, but there were some that were already committed, and so I wanted to know that, so that way I wasn't going around showing 20, 30 homes, and then after 20, 30 homes, they're like, oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you I'm already working with someone, and then I wasted a whole bunch of my time, and so, that's important to kind of get the commitment as well, too. So hopefully this helps. If again, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you ever want to partner with me, or if you ever have any questions, I do have a calendar link below where you can contact me, or you can schedule a free Zoom meeting with me where we'll discuss your business if you do want to partner together and how we can better assist and better help you. So hope you all make it a great day.